Okay. All right. Very good.
Some of the attitudes in covenant 22, like blessed are the peacemakers.
Okay.
Blessed are you if you when they revile you and persecute you.
Okay. All right. So yeah, a lot of expansion on this idea in the New Testament from the life of Jesus and from the instructions we have from him and the apostles. All right, very good. Anybody else? All right, let's go on into lesson 16 then. Everybody get a copy of the new lesson 16, because if you weren't here Sunday, the old lesson 16 was really lesson 15 with just the title change. So you didn't get it? You got it, Tim? Need one here? And I've got an extra copy if we don't have enough. All right, I've got one here. Actually, I have two, so we may have just enough. There's your one. Who else need one? Pass that down. All right, so this lesson is going to deal with the conduct that God expected his people to observe as they lived under his covenant. Now, we've talked a lot about in the past two lessons how they were supposed to treat each other, but now we're going to get into specifics of how God expected them to behave towards himself. All right? And that mirrors what we saw in the Ten Commandments themselves. And then finally we're going to talk about what they're supposed to do in regards to entering the land and conquering it and how they were supposed to handle that situation. All right, so let's begin here with this first verse, Exodus 22 through 26. Somebody want to read that for me? Can you tell you?
Then the Lord said to Moses, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, you yourselves have seen that I have spoken to you from heaven. You shall not make other gods besides me, gods of silver or gods of gold. You shall not make for yourselves. You shall make an altar of earth for me, and you shall sacrifice only a burnt offering and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen, in every place where I cause my name to be remembered. I will come to you and bless you. If you make an altar of stone for me, you shall not build it out of cut stone. For if you plow your tool on it, you will profane it. And you shall not go up by the steps of the altar, so that your nakedness will not be exposed on it.
Okay, so maybe something that's not as impressed upon us as the folks hearing this for the first time is how much this cut across the normal religious practices, especially of the Canaanites of that day. Most of the things that you just read here that God says don't do, they were doing. I mean, certainly they were worshiping idols, but they were also elaborate in the way they built their altars and the sacred pillars and the high places and all that stuff, and going up by steps and all that to the altar. So a lot of these things would have just been directly aimed at not repeating the mistakes of the Canaanites. But it also was how God wanted them to worship him, right? I mean, this is basically, this is question 2, which of the Ten Commandments do these verses really apply to? First commandment and the second one, right? Yeah, both of those. Ma'am? Okay. All right, so question 1, back up to that. How does verse 22 relate to verse 23? What'd you put for that? Couldn't figure that one out? Okay.
There's no image of God on the mountain. We've got Moses. There's no image of God, so they didn't have really an image to go by if they wanted to build false images.
That,
Very important heaven that they would see.
okay, that's exactly right. The verse 22 says, you shall say to the sons of Israel, You yourselves have seen that I have spoken to you from heaven. All right, so that's going to establish two things. First of all, like Butch said, they heard a voice. They didn't see anything that they could make an image to if they wanted to. So that takes care of that part. But they also heard God from heaven speak to them, and he identified himself. And that's the only God they heard there, right? So the two main principles of the first and the second commandment are kind of related to the way God revealed himself at Sinai. And that's what he's making the point here between verse 22 and 23. This is what I did, so therefore you behave accordingly. All right, question 3. What two construction materials were approved by God for altars? Earth and stone, and in particular with regard to the stone. So in other words, it was what? Just natural rocks, yeah. So they would just stack rocks up and that would be their altar. Now, why did God give those instructions? That's the second part of the question.
Like you said, while those not being electric, keep it simple, use what you can.
Okay.